one of the discoverers of this amazing ability of the brain that is to change in response to the environment. And she told us about how extraordinary the human brain was, and that it defined who we are as people, and it defined how we see and feel and touch. Bad anxiety is unchecked anxiety. That anxiety is the flip side of your desire to bring the best to your audience. You are changing the brain's neurochemical milieu every time you move your body. So I have this visualization of a little garbage truck going to all the synapses and cleaning up all the garbage, and it takes 8 hours to get to the billions of synapses in the brain. Well, imagine you give yourself 5 hours. Why don't we have joy conditioning? Joy conditioning will enhance the most joyful memories of our entire lives.
Welcome to Good Sex at NYU. I'm Danielle Element, and I am excited and have to say a little bit anxious to be in conversation with Dr. Wendy Suzuki, the Dean of the College of Arts and Science, Professor of Neuroscience, and author of Healthy Brain, Happy Life, a personal program to activate your brain and do everything better, and Good Anxiety, harnessing the power of the most misunderstood emotion. Dr. Suzuki trained at UC Berkeley with brain plasticity pioneer Marion Diamond, earned her PhD at UC San Diego, and completed a postdoctoral fellowship at NIH, all before joining NYU faculty in 1998. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you joining us today.
I'm so excited to be here, Danielle.
Yeah, thank you. So you seem to fall in love, I guess you would say. Fall in love.
You want to continue?
Fall in love with the brain pretty early on in your
Yes.
academics. Can you share what made the brain so fascinating, and are you still in love with it today?
Yes. Okay. I'll answer the last question first. Absolutely. Still in love with it as a research topic, as something that I think about every day to enrich and explore. But there was a very specific moment where I fell in love with the brain and neuroscience. And that was the first day of my freshman year at UC Berkeley. And I walked in to a first-year seminar class. To this day, first-year seminar classes have a very special place in my heart. And the one that I had chosen as a first-year student was the brain and its potential. And I just chose it for the topic. I didn't know who the professor was, but little did I know, I chose really well because she was a superstar, a neuroscientific superstar who, as you suggested, was a pioneer and one of the discoverers of this amazing ability of the brain that is to change in response to the environment. And she told us about how extraordinary the human brain was, and that it defined who we are as people, and it defined how we see and feel and touch. But the thing that got me was that she had a flair for the dramatic, and she had a flowered hat box on the counter in front of her. And as she was regaling us with all the things the human brain does for us every moment of the day, she lifted up the cover of that hat box, and with her gloved hand, she reached in and she pulled out a real preserved human brain, which of course none of us saw. It was like, is that real? Is that, what is that? And it was all the realizations that there was a brain in front of us, that we had one in our head, that it was doing all the things that she was saying. And so to this day, it was the most memorable moment of education in my entire career. And I fell in love with the brain, with her as a teacher. I like to call her the Beyonce of neuroscientists because she had so much command of the classroom, of our attention. And it's like, wow, that is amazing. So yes, that was the moment I fell in love with the human brain.
Well, I think for that to be the first day.
Yeah, it was the first day.
So dramatic. Like you would not know what to expect every day that you go to seminar.
Exactly. Yeah. It's every day going to be like this. Who else is going to pull things out of a hat box?
Yeah, definitely. So I mentioned in my intro that I was a bit anxious coming into this interview, just to be like transparent, because the topic that we're talking about, you know, I think I did a deep dive into your background and
Yeah.
your research. I read your books. And so coming into this, I was thinking, oh gosh, like you've had so many amazing interviews. You have done so much. I was feeling a little bit like a lot of pressure on myself.
No, I'm sorry.
Because I really want the conversation to be something that our students will really benefit from.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, just the building of anxiety that was happening for me. But I'm wondering, like, you know, thinking of all of that, you have a book called Good Anxiety, and it
Yes.
talks about good anxiety and bad
Yeah.
anxiety. And can you help us like
Right.
distinguish between those two and like what really happens in the brain body when the bad anxiety like takes the wheel?
Yeah. So let me start with that. What is bad anxiety? Bad anxiety is unchecked anxiety. And that would be if you started with this anxiety, you want to do well and a lot of pressure on yourself, but you let that continue through the entire interview and into post-production, and it just never left you, and it turned into this chronic state of anxiety that you didn't have a good way to shut off. Good anxiety starts with exactly the same thing, because I will point out that anxiety is the flip side of your desire to bring the best to your audience, to our NYU students. And that's such a beautiful incentive, right?
Yeah.
And maybe there was pressure because I've done a lot of podcasts, and that's fine too. But what you can do is have that end right now, and just focus on a fun conversation, which is what I try and do in podcasts. I don't care. Like, I could be focusing on, I hope I give an answer that was as good as my best answer I've ever given. I don't do that. I really try, and I'm looking to you for the beautiful brain that you have and the beautiful questions and how you've interpreted the information that I provided. And that's why I get excited about these podcasts. Oh, maybe somebody has a new take and an interesting way to think about and how they bring their own selves to anxiety and brain health, which are two of my favorite topics.
Yeah, well, thank you for calming my anxiety.
Okay, good.
I usually do get anxious whenever I'm speaking in front of people or whenever I'm having this. And then once I'm like in it, I just completely like forget. I'm like, oh, I was anxious before, but now I'm feeling just like myself.
Yes. Well, that's a perfect example of good anxiety, because anxiety is there. First of all, nobody will be able to get rid of all of your anxiety. It is there for a purpose, to highlight something important coming up, something that means something to you, which is why you get butterflies every time, there's a big thing happening. You really want to give that great introduction, which is something that I do. I have to introduce so many different people, and so I get butterflies as well, but it's because I want it to be really good. But to allow it to do that work, but then enjoy the moment, that is where the good anxiety really kicks in.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, you have such great like research experience. Like, it's amazing to like think about all the things that you have learned about the brain. But I'm wondering, like, have you had some personal experiences that have really made some of your research come to life in your own life?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been different at different points in my career, because I've switched my research over my career. And I'll start with my earliest kind of neuroscience topic love, which is memory. And I one of my mentors said that, and it's always stuck with me, that memory is so important to understand and to study, because it defines our own personal histories. Your personal history of how you think about yourself is dependent on how your memory works. That's why we want to understand it. What goes in, what stays out, because it's not a veridical, book of exactly what happens. It's your interpretation of your whole life. And I think that is such a beautiful way to think about it. And the thing that influenced me there it was kind of personal, but it was the understanding and the study of the most famous neurological patient. His initials were HM, and now we know because he's passed away that his name was Henry Mollison. And he, in the 1940s, had so very, very severe epilepsy. It was intractable. It wasn't cured by any drug or anything that they tried. And so they went in and they did a surgical intervention, which they don't do very often, but they did an experimental one because his epilepsy was so overwhelming. What was working and what still works today is you go into a structure in the brain really important for memory called the hippocampus. That's defining all those personal histories. And you remove it on one side because usually the seizures start on one side.
Okay.
His was so severe. They took out both his hippocampi. Wow. They didn't know what the hippocampus did until they took out both his hippocampi, and he came out of surgery with much lower levels of seizures. It didn't go away, but it was much lowered, but no ability to form any new long-term memory for the rest of his life. And thinking about what would that be like if I could only live in the moment, what his reality was like. And it got personal because when I was a postdoc and a first-year assistant professor at NYU, I was friendly with the neuropsychologist who studied HM for over 40 years, Suzanne Corkin. She was a professor at MIT. And she gave me permission to use a personal recorded interview to be able to hear his voice, because that was very rare at that moment to be able to, there were tons of papers about him, but to listen to his voice and to hear how he spoke about his life. And it was so moving because what he said was he could understand and remember enough to know that people were studying him and it was helpful for humankind. And so he knew his memory was not good, but to be able to articulate that was so touching to me. And it made me even more kind of proud to be able to study memory and how that works. And part of so many researchers right after him was so that nobody would ever have to live through that again. Of course, they immediately stopped doing those bilateral resections of the hippocampus, but it was a really poignant reminder of what can happen if you don't, what it's like to live with no memory and is not a life. So you think, why is memory so important? Well, there was this most famous patient from the start. So that was my first one. It really stuck with me for a long time. That was the topic that I studied the longest.
Yeah. Well, I think you're also bringing up some things for me because in a lot of the work that I do as a therapist, we're talking about memories and how they've been, interpreted and how they impact developmentally and how they're continuing to this day to impact. So I think memory has a huge role in how we, adapt and how we function. So I think it's a really important thing to study and for people to understand like where that comes from and how like memories, again, open to our own interpretation.
Right.
How I think of something is different than the way my sister might, and I might have experienced it in, the exact same time.
Yeah.
So I think that's really valuable. Were there other, you switched topics?
Yeah, I switched topics. And then the next big one is also related to memory. It's when I was trying to get tenure at New York University. And my strategy wasn't the best. It was just to put my head down and just work 100% of the time. No social engagements, no workouts, I just work 100% of the time because I thought that's the perfect strategy to get tenure. And yes, there was productivity in that approach, but I ended up just not moving my body enough. I was anxious and really unhappy because I wasn't kind of using my social muscles and making friends. And I ended up feeling very lethargic, and I was grumpy, and it wasn't a good moment. And I went on a river rafting trip by myself because I had no friends. And so I go on this river rafting trip, and I was outside, and we were, river rafting together, and it just kick-started me back into, what are you doing, Wendy? You have to get more active. And so when I got back from this trip, I went to the gym. Immediately, it started making me feel better, and I started noticing that my writing got better, my memory, certainly my mood got better, and I felt stronger. But when I noticed that my writing was getting better, and it was because I could focus longer, and my memory for all those little details that you have to weave together in a grant got better, that really made me want to turn and understand what's going on. Am I just have a good week? Is that a good writing week? But no, things were changing in my brain. And the thing that added to that was that right at that moment when I was noticing all these positive benefits on my own brain from working out regularly, and I truly went from couch potato to gym rat, like regularly, more and more, sometimes 2 classes in one evening, in a healthy way. I didn't, go overboard, but it just felt so good.
Yeah.
Being raised in California, I had that feeling. I knew it was like to be physically active, and I had just suppressed that for, I don't know, six years that I was trying to get tenure. So maybe not for the whole 6 years. That's a little dramatic, but for many years, I would say. And at that time, my mom called me and told me that my dad wasn't feeling well. And she said that he couldn't remember how to drive home from the 7-Eleven where he had been driving home from for the last 25, 30 years to get his afternoon cup of coffee. And I knew that was very bad because spatial memory is dependent on the hippocampus, the structure that I'd been studying. And when you start to have those kinds of memory impairments, it is a telltale sign of dementia and Alzheimer's dementia. And it turned out that he did end up having, several years later, he was absolutely diagnosed with Alzheimer's dementia. And what I noticed was everything that had improved in me, my mood improved, my focus improved, my memory improved, suddenly went downhill for him. He was a very smart man. He knew something was wrong with his memory, and he was probably covering for an amount of time before. So he can't remember how to get home from 7-Eleven. That is disturbing. And his memory was clearly problematic, and his focus was not what it was, and he was depressed because it's very scary to have that happen to you. And so those things together were what drove me to eventually switch my research from memory to a version of memory with the effects of exercise on the brain, because exercise does affect memory, but affects so many other brain functions, that it really opened up my eyes to many more brain areas that I hadn't studied in depth. But so that was a true turning point in my career, to have those personal things happen to me. And I turned around and I said, I have to study that. I'm a neuroscientist. I don't have to study memory and the hippocampus for the rest of my career.
Yeah. I have a follow-up question because thank you for sharing that about your father. And I have recently had 2 of my paternal aunts who, well, not so recently. One has had Alzheimer's for the last 6 years. And another one just recently got diagnosed. And I'm curious, with your research, do you see that folks who've been diagnosed have any level of improvement with physical activity as well?
Yeah. So there are some studies that look at this, and what they show is that any level of physical activity at almost any stage of dementia can be beneficial. Now, usually these people are older, and there are other things. Their mobility may not be great. I mean, I didn't send my dad for walks because it was a little dangerous, and falls, as we know in older people, can be extra dangerous. So that just turns the mirror to all of us younger stages, that anything that you can do on a regular basis to increase your regular movement in your life. I'm not saying you have to start running and be a marathon runner, but that is going to benefit you as we are all aging at exactly the same rate. And so the answer is yes. As much as they can move regularly, get them to move regularly in the fun way, not in a, you better,
Right,
go.
You have to.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's also been something that like me and my siblings have been thinking about for our own like genetic link is like, okay, well, like I want them to be healthy and okay, but what do I need to do then to try to like prevent that from happening?
Yeah.
So I really found your books to be really helpful in that area. I work with students in a clinical capacity, and we're daily talking about anxiety. We're talking about how family, trauma, also genetics and certain like behaviors that might impact. I'm curious if you can share a little bit about how things like genetics and environment and behaviors impact someone's susceptibility
sure.
to anxiety.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say that overall, don't worry if you feel more anxious. Everybody, I think the whole world has higher levels of anxiety. We've all just come out of a worldwide epidemic. That was a huge event, and anxiety levels around the world went up. And yes, there is evidence that there is higher or lower susceptibility to anxiety levels based on your genetics. However, I would also say that it doesn't relegate you to, have anxiety for the rest of your life. There are things that you can do and approaches that you can take and mindset shifts that you can try and implement that can help your anxiety levels. It takes a little bit of practice, and it also takes more than practice. I would say that it takes self-exploration because everybody has things that they're more willing and less willing to do. Don't start with those things that you're like, oh, I'm never going to do this ever again. Go with those things that you're already doing. If people and social interactions are something that will always calm you, then focus on that. Maybe that gives you more anxiety. Maybe it is music. Maybe it is art that you can go and enjoy on your own. It's a wonderful thing to explore because it's an ask to go out and find those things that bring you relaxation and comfort. It is the best homework assignment that any teacher can give you. And that is really step one to start to kind of build your own repertoire of good anxiety tools for your own toolkit.
Yeah. I love that because I'm always talking to my clients about what are you currently doing?
Yes.
And then we try to experiment and they sometimes look at me like I'm a little bizarre, to be like, you want me to do what now?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't sound like something that you can do.
Yeah.
What else can we try?
Right.
And like they'll come in and say, well, I couldn't do that. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's not a failure. You've learned that that's not something that you can do.
Yes.
Let's try something else.
Yes. Yes.
What are some other steps that you would say? Because that was step one.
Yes. Step one, finding all those tools that decrease your anxiety. I'm going to highlight 2 science-based tools before I go to the next step. Okay. In fact, I have a 3-step toolkit to provide everybody. So my 2 science-based go-tos to decrease your anxiety. We've already talked about one. Moving your body is an immediate and a long-term improvement to anxiety levels. Even a 10-minute walk has been shown to decrease anxiety levels in non-anxious people, not people that are, have clinical levels of anxiety, but kind of the rest of us. 80% of the population have non-clinical, but noticeable levels of anxiety. A simple walk can help that. And people don't realize it's within your reach. You don't have to go out and buy new clothes. Wear the shoes that you have. Go for a walk. We happen to live in a beautiful walking city, so it's always available to us. That's number one. Number two is meditation. And I always start with breath meditation, just deep breathing in and out is the oldest form of meditation and also has immediate effects because why? It stimulates your parasympathetic nervous system that kind of launches all these things that put you in that rest and digest mode. It'll slow your heart rate. It'll close your irises so you're not, danger eye levels. It will eventually shift your blood from your muscles because when you're getting ready to run, fight or flight, your blood goes to your muscles. It'll shift that blood flow from your muscles to your digestion and reproductive organs, which is that rest and digest kind of pattern of physiology. So in fact, I literally just got back from a week-long breath meditation retreat that I go on every single year. It's challenging. They're really powerful breath patterns, and you get headaches because not headaches, but you get lightheaded because you're trying. But boy, you improve. I improved throughout the week, and it was the most wonderful way to get into this calm state. You might not be able to do that, and that's where and you probably send people to YouTube. So many free kinds of meditation.
Yeah.
You don't like breath meditation? Then try some other visualization meditation. So many different kinds. That's your self-exploration of what you enjoy coming back again. So movement and meditation are my go-tos. That's step one. Learn what decreases your anxiety and stress levels. Step two is, I'm sure, what you talk about with your clients, which is what makes you anxious? What are those things that are triggers for you? And so it's good to be aware of that. And what I always try and do is give the extra added flip, which is all those things that make you anxious. We just talked about, interviewing somebody, making you anxious. It is showing what you hold dear, what you value. You get anxious before these interviews because you value providing a really interesting conversation for this podcast. Again, a beautiful thing. And so it's like, oh my gosh, this is just showing what I am so proud of doing. And instead of thinking, oh God, I'm so anxious. What if I don't do it well enough? Think this anxiety is getting me towards what I hold dear and appreciating that about yourself. I think that is a lesson that I learn over and over and over. I learned it in my, the book came to be Good Anxiety because of not a moment of anxiety, but because of a moment of grief. So I lost my father after his battle with Alzheimer's disease. He didn't pass away of Alzheimer's disease, which you can, but he had a unexpected heart attack, and it's devastating. Anybody who loses a parent, devastating for everybody. And I was in the middle of writing Good Anxiety. It's like, I can't write a book about anxiety now. I'm grieving. And as I was using all my tools, exercise, meditation, to try and get back into my groove and find that, but also appreciating those deep feelings of grief that were coming up. That is when I realized that on the flip side of that grief is deep love. And I would never experience that deep grief had I not had that deep love. And at first it made me even sadder. It's like, how come I didn't appreciate that even earlier? But it was also very beautiful. And I can appreciate that in anticipation of, not anticipation, I'm waiting for everybody to die, but it's made me appreciate people in a different way. Whether they're old or young, like, what is special about you? I'm spending time with you. And it is living on the flip side of anxiety. So I think even though I never described it that way at the time I'm writing the book, as you might know, you rewrite the book over and over and over. Every new podcast, ooh, I like that idea.
Yeah.
And you add that as if you came up with it in the book. No, I was never in the idea. But I love the idea that you just inspired in me. That good anxiety is really living on the flip side of your anxiety, living for what you value, what you hold dear, and focusing on that. And using anxiety to remind you of that, but not living in that anxiety. I think that's one of the long-lasting lessons that I've taken from the book and my own exploration of my own anxiety.
Yeah. So when you deeply care about something,
Yes,
is when that anxiety creeps in.
Yes.
And sometimes it can take over, but
Yeah.
using some of these skills that you have shared, I think are really helpful. I think that oftentimes I will have clients in my office and I will talk to them
yeah,
about breath or meditation, and they kind of roll their eyes
Yeah.
like, you really just want me to breathe.
Yeah.
Breathing's really going to help. And so, you have to have some patience with that process. So
Yeah.
if you're not quite ready, what else can we do?
yeah.
Right. And so I'm wondering, how do you approach something like that? When, someone tells you, oh, does meditation or physical activity really work? I mean,
Yeah.
is there some science or changes in the brain that you've noticed that you will come to them with data?
Absolutely. And so I've studied the longest the effects of physical activity on the brain. And there are immediate physiological changes that happen. And I like to give the image of you are changing the brain's neurochemical milieu every time you move your body, or if you decide to sit on your butt all day. That's also changing the brain's milieu. But let me focus on what happens when you move your body. You've gone out, you've taken that 10-minute walk around Washington Square Park, you feel good. And why do you feel good? It's because that walk has released all these neurochemicals in your brain that were not there when you were feeling anxious before you decided to take that walk. And you've heard of these neurochemicals before. They include serotonin is going up, dopamine, noradrenaline, endorphins are all going up. They make you feel good. Dopamine is the reward chemical. Serotonin is what goes up in antidepressants. You feel better after that. And so imagine if you give that what I like to call neurochemical bubble bath to your brain regularly. That is why regular exercise will change your baseline mood levels from more anxious and depressed to less anxious and depressed. That is exactly what's happening with exercise. With meditation, you are activating the parasympathetic nervous system. You are, at its core, all forms of meditation, including breath work and visualizations, all different forms, are a form of practicing your ability to shift and focus your attention. You are, and I'll tell you, I worked really hard on this, focusing on keeping that breath going in the particular patterns that we were using took a lot of energy, and I wanted to break away and I wanted to take a break. But no, I focused on, I got better in my physical breathing, but I also got better at focusing on that. And that's what I find, and science has found as well. You get better at deciding with meditation, I'm going to focus on the friendly face in the crowd and not the frowny person over there. No, often I might be attracted to the frowny person. Like, why are you frowning?
Right.
Change your expression. No, with meditation, I have more control over where I focus on the positive, on the breath, even with chaos going on around us, as we often do have here in New York City. You can focus on the music or focus on just the physical sensations of the walk. That is what you are working in your skill set with meditation. And so instead of being drawn in 100 different directions, you choose, I'm going to focus on my breath.
Yeah, I think that's really important because, so many of our students are very, driven and focused and, drive a lot of their identity through academic achievement.
Yes.
And I think that it's really challenging for them to take a break or to not just, combine multiple things on top of multiple things. And like they have no space for some of these things. And their activity is limited to like walking from one class to the next or, yes, I eat, but like, limited because I'm running. So how would you talk to a student about how they can incorporate some of these things? And again, some of it you've already said, like walking around the block at Union Square or like at Washington Square Park. But I think that like I have tried to be like, okay, can you take a 5-minute break and just take some deep breaths? But I'm wondering like how you might approach a student who is struggling with something like that.
Well, first I would say that what if there was something that I could tell you that you can do that would take time, but would make your brain work better with the time that's left. So it's going to suck away time from the things that you usually do. But in the time that you have left, your brain will literally work better. Your memory structure will look better. Your focus will be better. And then cross my fingers that they think, ooh, that sounds interesting, or, move on. But that is exactly what happens when you encourage people to take time off. And this is where take your choice. Maybe meditation appeals more than walking around. They both work. Choose one that is helpful for you. Maybe it is a slow meal. Maybe it's a slow meal with a friend. Maybe it's social connection. Also something that can really enhance brain function. Maybe it is sleep. I found that students are truly worried about their sleep patterns. They know it's not good, and they want suggestions. And one of the most common questions I get recently is, how long do I have to make up for 4 years of high school not sleeping very much? And it's like, okay, there's not a formula like that. But the good news is you can start tonight and getting more sleep and building that muscle of putting that into your daily routine will benefit long-term your 4 years at NYU.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we often start with students is really basics.
Yeah.
And I think they want to know that, like, I don't need that. I don't need to talk about like my food intake or how much I'm sleeping. I was like, well, I mean, we all know like hierarchy of needs, right? Like we have to start there, because if you're not getting at least 6 hours, we would hope for 7 or 8, but like, let's talk about at least 6. Then your body isn't able to like recover.
Yes.
And you need that. And if you're not getting good nutrients, because our students are running from place to place, they're eating sometimes, really great fast food, but also sometimes, not a well-balanced diet. And how that really impacts like the brain, like good gut health can really have a impact on serotonin and dopamine levels as well. And so like they're somewhat resistant at times.
Yes. I've seen that as well. The analogy that I use for sleep is that there are many different things that sleep does beneficial for the brain, but one that I think hits home is that with the recommended 8 hours, and I do recommend that 8 hours, during that time is when all the metabolites built up from all that brain work that all our students are doing, that all of us are doing every single day, gets cleaned out. So I have this visualization of a little garbage truck going to all the synapses and cleaning up all the garbage, and it takes 8 hours to get to the billions of synapses in the brain. So that's a great image, and then it all gets cleaned up and you wake up with a shiny, clean brain. Well, imagine you give yourself 5 hours because you are a really, really, focused student and you need to wake up and do the next thing. That means you have 3 hours worth of garbage left in your brain. And imagine that for the last month of the whole semester, when you're getting ready to do the most important cognitive work of the entire semester, your final papers, your final presentations, you have built up garbage in your brain that does not allow for optimum brain performance. That is what's happening. And when you say that, they're like, yeah, I kind of feel like I have garbage in my brain. Oh my God, what do? Sleep more. But I know that is hard. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to go 8 hours tonight when you've trained yourself to sleep for 5 or 6 max. So that is something you want to start at the beginning of the semester. And I have an exciting new course that I'm starting called Brain Health 101. And it's going to be a buddy system. And so your buddy, you will help with those reminders. You will share what you're doing, what you didn't do, all the successes, all the failures. And so I think that is so helpful. So you're not all alone in your same old head, your same old arguments and excuses, but you have somebody to help you stay accountable and really ask you, did that really help, or was it, nothing?
Yeah.
And to be honest, to help you to be honest with all those questions.
Yeah, I love that. Is that going to be required for all students, all
Eventually,
faculty, all
right now,
all administrators?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're going to start with the students and see how it works. But I think the buddy system, which I used on my breath meditation retreat, and it really got my buddy and I deeper in what that meditation allowed us to do and kind of bring up from the depths that get kind of covered up because we're so busy with different things. And it was a beautiful process to be able to do that. But it was because I had this buddy. And so because of that experience, I'm bringing it into the classroom. I think it's very powerful.
Yeah, I think I'm reminded of when I've been really consistent at the gym.
Yes.
It has been often when I've had some type of person I'm checking in with about it. I can do it, and I've done it for years and years, but there are just times I go through these like, oh, I'm not super motivated, or oh, like, gosh, I just do the same thing. I'm so bored.
Yeah.
And so when I have those moments that I'm not able to motivate, really needing to have that person who's something like an accountability partner to be like, what are you doing today to be active? Or what are you doing to like tune into this?
Right.
That has really been helpful. So I think that really is something that could be helpful for anyone and everyone.
Exactly. You remind me of, I have a wonderful friend who does that for me kind of automatically. And she came up with this idea of a creativity walk. It's like, hey, Wendy, you want to go on a creativity morning walk? It's like, ooh, that sounds good. And so we just go and we just, chat together and it's, we never run. It's more like a power walk in the morning, but it's nice and early before anything starts. And, it's such a fun way to think about it, and you can do creativity walk, you can do dreaming walk. Add that element of creativity to these things, and it just adds something special, makes it fun.
Yeah, you reminded me that I read this article, I think over the summer in the New York Times, that talked about having a walk immediately after you eat.
Yes.
And they coined it the fart walk.
I read that, yeah.
And so I've been calling my walks after, I'm going to my fart walk. And it was just kind of this humorous thing. But now people will ask me about it, be like, oh, how are those fart walks? You still, I'm like, well, I haven't been doing them as much lately. But I think that's something you can do to, help with anxiety, but also just to get out and take a breath of fresh air. I feel like, we're taking these short breaths all of the time. That when you go out into nature, you're kind of forced to take in the deep breaths. And sometimes in New York City, it's not so pleasant.
Yeah, right.
But, to be able to pause and to see your surroundings, I think is really beautiful. And to have again, a partner that you're doing that with, or a friend or a neighbor, someone that you can get out there and hold you accountable and keep you consistent.
You just reminded me that there was something that I discovered when I went to NYU Paris. And so I went to NYU Paris. I gave my good anxiety talk at NYU Paris. And there was an alum there. And she said, oh, my God, you have to come. I do meditation walks in the Tuileries Gardens. And I would love you to come and do it. So great. I don't have anything to do this afternoon. So I met her. And it was about Paris, dense city, so much traffic, but the garden is beautiful. And we started in this open, it was really hot space, and just to notice that we're off the street. But then we went from there into the denser tree-lined part of the park. And because we were going so slow and we were really focused on the feelings, you could feel the air felt nicer. there compared to the pollution air that we all have in big cities.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, that's amazing. I never would have noticed that in my touristy, I'm going to walk through the Tuileries. Okay, check that off.
Right.
But she really made me notice that. And so, of course, I came back to New York. I'm like, let me try that in Washington Square Park because I never noticed how dense those trees are, especially on the east side of the park. And I did, and I felt the same kind of change in air quality from the street Broadway. Go from Broadway to that east side of Washington Square Park and do it with a friend. And you will feel the difference in this green space.
Yeah.
And I do that every morning. I definitely I explicitly walk through that just to be able to feel that. It's like, oh, yeah, it's still there.
Yeah.
So the little things like that to bring you more into nature are also things that can help decrease anxiety and calm yourself.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that one of the things that I did during the pandemic was take lots and lots of walks.
Yes.
I recommend sometimes to students who maybe struggle with some of the mindfulness activities or some of the meditation that sometimes walking, if you just tune into like all of the different senses
Yes.
that you're engaging with
Right.
on a walk, that can be meditation and that
Yeah.
can be mindfulness, and it
Right.
can really sort of take you and keep you in the present and help you to focus a little bit more in on your breath.
Yes.
And so it's those small things that we need to do
Yeah.
in order to really sort of stay calm and sort of make sure our nervous system is in a good place.
Yes.
Are there other things that you recommend? Because you've said these things that I want to just like pull and take with me.
Yeah.
So many of them, but like two of the things that I thought were really great images were the garbage truck in my brain, which I love. And also I think it was like the serotonin and dopamine bath.
Yeah, bubble bath.
The
bubble bath
bath
for your brain.
the bubble bath for my brain.
Yes.
Any other of those like images that are really helpful for us to take away today? Because again, I'm thinking of those things.
Yeah.
Like, those are really like powerful to keep in
Yeah.
mind when I'm thinking about doing some of these activities.
I don't have, you chose my two best images, so I don't have anything better than that. But I do have my favorite tool, anti-anxiety tool that's in the last part of the book, which is a concept that I created for the book called joy conditioning. And so it's the complete opposite of what we all experience, which is fear conditioning. And everybody has had it, when you had a bad experience. My apartment was broken into once, and I still got this scared feeling when I came around the same corner when I discovered the door crowbarred open. And I had that for the rest of the time I lived there. That is fear conditioning, and it is protective so that you stay vigilant, but that still stays with me. It's like, oh, this is terrible. I'm just going to collect a whole bunch of fear memories for my life. Is that how there has to be something different? And I started thinking, well, why don't we have joy conditioning? And so, but joy doesn't stick with us as powerfully as those fear memories for protective purposes. But I happen to be an expert on memory, and I know how to make memories stick. And the simplest way to make memories stick is to repeat them. Repetition makes memories stronger. But going back to what we were just saying of getting all the senses, to make a joyful memory stick even better. It's not just repeat, oh yeah, I remember that was really funny, but think about who was there. Think about how it made you feel. Think about the temperature in the air. And so also just realize, when was the last time you thought about the top 5 most joyful memories in your life? It could be never. It's like they happen. I enjoyed it at the moment, but I don't think about that anymore.
Yeah.
And so I have these moments that I do go back to, and I think about it. And the one that makes me laugh still makes me laugh. The one where I remember, the best family parties, the best friends parties. Use that and go back to that when you want to. Maybe you're in a down mood. Use joy conditioning to bring that back, and maybe every time add a new sense or go a little bit deeper in that memory. Because we started out with this idea that memories build our own personal histories. And I love that joy conditioning will enhance the most joyful memories of our entire lives stronger than they are today.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, because I do a lot of work with students who experience sexual assault and relationship violence. And, those are, trauma memories.
Yeah.
And, I will use the image of, you come out of your apartment and you see a lion. And so every time you come out of your apartment, you feel like the lion's going to be there.
Yeah.
You see them all throughout your day because of that fear.
Yeah.
And there's a certain amount that's protecting you from this happening again.
Right.
Right. And so I think oftentimes we're trying to come up with a memory or something joyful or something in their, future or something in their past that they can focus on to help calm their nervous system.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really great to be able to translate that not just in folks who've experienced trauma or to do it in, just our day-to-day life instead of like focusing on just when we experience trauma.
Yeah.
Because those things are going to happen to all of us. Like trauma happens throughout the course of our life, whether it's, that type of trauma or COVID or parents passing away or, all things that are going to happen if we are lucky enough to live a long life.
Yeah.
So like to be able to bring up those joyful memories are, I think, really important.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'm curious also because this podcast is a little bit about relationships.
Yeah.
How do you think the, anxiety, some of these things that we're talking about when it comes to like brain functioning impacts our relationships and our sexual performances? Or have you like any ideas around that to help with?
Yeah. I mean, I think anxiety, well, first, one of the things I've focused on since I became dean is kind of acknowledging and fighting against this epidemic of loneliness that we have. So loneliness has a big effect on relationships, on sexual activities, sexual performance. And I think that there is a lot of anxiety around social interactions and getting back in the saddle, so to speak, after COVID, where there was a lot of social isolation. That's what caused the epidemic of loneliness. And so I think that finding those joyful moments around a good connection with somebody that you didn't think you might have not known before, but you had a good connection, focusing on that instead of the awkwardness that happens to all of us. It's not like there's something wrong with you, but trying to bring in some of those same techniques are really, really important. But I can speak to loneliness and how it's the flip side of social interaction. So good for your brain. It makes your life happy, the more strong social connections that you have. And by contrast, loneliness will make your life sad. And so what can you do to enrich your life in that way that's right for you? You may never be the party center of the party, as I am not, but there are moments of social interaction that everybody appreciates, they love, they gravitate to what is that for you, and how can you create that more in your life? I like to think of that as a positive challenge for people to explore.
Yeah, I think that's so important, especially because we have students who didn't have a normal high school experience that have entered college at this point since the pandemic ended. And so it's very different than my experience, which was, well before the pandemic, like decades before that. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that like we all experience anxiety, but also the awkwardness of, even I think sometimes people who don't seem it. Because I think I'm, somewhat on the, middle ground of introvert, extrovert. And so I feel like incredibly awkward sometimes. But it's just like to be able to have those self-soothing, like conversations with ourselves to be like, what, I bet other people in this room are probably feeling awkward, a little uncomfortable. And so I'm just going to like sit with that and be like, okay, I'm okay. And I'm going to be able to be okay in this space, I think is really important.
I often forget to share that as dean, I'm always in front. I'm always speaking to people, and as a professor, I have to give lectures, and I enjoy giving lectures. But people might be surprised to know that I grew up as a very, very strong introvert and had a lot of social anxiety in the classroom, where I loved learning, but like everybody, I wanted to interact and I wanted to ask that question, but I'm going to look stupid. I'm going to say something stupid, and then I'm going to look stupid in front of everybody. I had that for years and years and years. which ended up being my superpower when I stood in the front of the classroom, because I went into academics, because I knew that while only 5 people raised their hands, 80% of the people had questions that they didn't want to ask because they were too socially anxious to do so. And so I tried to create, my goal was always to try and create an atmosphere where you don't have to ask me in front of everybody else. Come ask me before, come ask me after. Get used to asking those questions. But I only did that because I knew what it felt like. And you can tell you can tell from the eyes, there's something behind there, but they're not raising their hands. And you don't want to say, I could tell you have a question. But I evolved to, I still remember myself when I was shy, but just like you were saying, I flipped myself out of it. It's like, now I'm the speaker. And so I play a little bit that role. It's the fake it till you make it thing, but that's still going on in my brain to this day.
Yeah, I think that's important for people to know. I feel like I was always that person too, that I have a question, but someone will get to it.
Yeah,
someone will ask that question, so I don't have to. And even today, I run this workshop called Navigating Healthy Relationships. And in one of the sessions, we talk about communication, we talk about blocks to listening. And one of them, is more so like, our coping strategies at times, but it's like rehearsing. And so sometimes I will get into my head, I have to sound smart. I want people to think that this is intelligent. Yes. I don't want people. And so I always use that as an example for students that are in there and they're like, really? You do this and you're worried about, I'm like, well, yeah, because I'm a human and I have my own past history of things. Yes. And so I have to also work around this, because just because I have a podcast or I also am, a director of a program at NYU and I end up doing workshops and things doesn't mean I don't get anxious. Doesn't mean I don't have to self-soothe and remember some of these things and take deep breaths. Yeah.
You remind me of something that I learned at this breath meditation retreat, which was I was so grateful of the listening skills of everybody in the group, because we were all there, no phones. We were, really there and present. And I've never felt so listened to, and it inspired me to listen deeply to just the sharing that was going on. And it's a beautiful skill. I'm a great believer is in you get what you give. And if you give deep listening to what is really being said and just bring whatever you bring to that, you will get that back. And that's such a beautiful thing to receive. So yes, we are all worried about that. But another antidote to that is to develop the skill of deep listening to somebody else, which I'm sure you talk about in your relationship, and it's just, it was just a wonderful reminder this past week of how powerful that is and how connected you can feel after a sharing of something because you've taken the time to listen deeply to this other person in front of you.
Yeah, I think listening deeply, we all want to be seen, heard, and understood. And I think that if you're feeling awkward and uncomfortable, anxious in those moments, it's okay, what are a couple of really good questions? And then just listen. Yeah. Have those things prepared. And you don't have to write them down. Okay, what's some really great, unique question? Not just how are you? Yeah. What do you do? It's what's the highlight of your week? What's your favorite dish that you're looking forward to making over the holiday? Yeah. You have a couple of more interesting questions in your back pocket, and okay, I have these questions in my back pocket. Yes. Yeah. And then just allow people to share and find those connections, because they really have an impact on our overall health and well-being.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anything else that you feel would be helpful for our students to know about the brain and anxiety, or any tips around being physically active?
Yeah. I think trust yourself to go in the direction that is that draws you for the physical activity and for the social interaction. Maybe it's one of the 300 clubs at NYU that cover whatever topic that you want. or maybe it's just, connecting more with the dorm, the space that you are living in. I'm so appreciative in the apartment building that I live in. There's this wonderful community of bakers. And so I get invited over for cake, homemade cake. And it's just an open invitation. I get a text. It's like, oh my God, that's so great. And it makes me want to invite them over to, I'm not a great cake baker, but I do other things. Yeah. And it goes into this movement. What can you invite? It doesn't have to be 5 people, maybe just one person. But again, kind of ending where we started, something that makes you feel good. So it also makes you feel good to share with somebody else. That says that you're going in the right direction.
Yeah. I really connect with that and want to rent a place in your apartment building for all the baked goods.
Yeah. It's a great place to live.
Awesome. And where can folks find you? I know you have these 2 books that we'll link to in our show notes.
Yeah.
You talked about an upcoming class that you're teaching. What are you currently teaching?
I am currently developing the class. Okay. It'll be a first-year seminar class taught in spring of 2026. Okay. And it might be live right now, but it's coming on live in definitely by early December 2025. Okay. They can find me and books and courses and lots of links to podcasts, including this one, at wendysuzuki.com, my website.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed our conversation and my anxieties gone.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you have questions about the podcast or anything that we've talked about today, please feel free to email us at goodsex.podcast@nyu.edu. We monitor this inbox during business hours and usually reply within 3 to 4 days. Since we can't cover everything in one episode, there may be some things that we missed, got it wrong, or it landed the wrong way. If so, please feel free to let us know. You can also check out our show notes for links to organizations, articles, books, and videos mentioned in this episode. If you're an NYU student and have questions about your sexual health, you can connect with our Student Health Center Sexpert at sexpert@nyu.edu or book an appointment through the Student Health Portal. If you have an urgent mental health concern, safety issues, or you are worried about someone that might have caused harm to you or you might have caused harm to someone, then you can contact NYU's Confidential Wellness Exchange at 212-443-9999. Chat with them using their mobile app or email them at wellness.exchange@nyu.edu. For any non-NYU listeners, then you can call the National Hotline on Sexual Assault at 1-800-656-4673 or the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Thanks for listening. Tune in next time, and don't forget to subscribe for more Good Sex at NYU.